Hello, everypony, and welcome back to another episode of Never After All Readings. I'm your host, Never After All, and you'll notice I have my camera on today, and there is only one reason that I do. Our book came in. Now, ignore the lighting in the back. It is a very good book. The cover's fine. I mean, it's 400 odd pages, $15, honestly. I would suggest buying it. I'm probably going to be reading from it now because it's actually really cool. I got one more coming in. I can't remember his Applejack series. I have that one hardback, so that's going to be cool to come in. And also have Fallout Equestria coming in. But with the little show and tell out of the way, we're going to move on to our chapter. Chapter 8. Of the Gentle Knights, Audience of One. The world of white faded, and Luna found herself in a large, dark cavern. Yet it didn't seem natural. The walls were too perfect in their circle, and the rocks were constantly changing shapes. It reminded her, unpleasantly, of a game Discord had once forced her and Celestia to play. She was glad he was stuck in his stone prison, hopefully for good this time. She perked her ears as two sounds arose simultaneously, laughter and sobbing. The laughter was ethereal. It echoed from all directions and also seemed to come from within. It was playful, but coarse and mocking, as though the walls themselves were filled with the mirth of some calamity. She eyed them, and she realized the rocks formed faces. The walls really were laughing, but not at her. She turned about to find a tiny purple filly. The little pony was curled in a tight ball, sobbing with her head buried beneath her hooves. Luna cringed. Helping foals was one thing, but this one was even younger than usual. What to say? She stared down at the little filly, thinking on the potential situations. After a while, she focused her magic on the foal's mind. She's too dumb to do anything right. Derpy Ditsy, Derpy Ditsy. I bet you're just as dumb as she is. So when are your eyes going to go all stupid, huh? Luna disconnected and shook her head to clear it. of the lingering thoughts. She frowned at the foal as familiar ache echoed upon her chest. Kneeling, she brought her horn down to rest across the foal's back. The spell was not complicated. This was a simple nightmare, and called for a simple solution. The laughter began to warp, the sounds becoming random and illogical. After a few seconds, it came back. There was no more mockery in the sound. No, this was the sound of children playing. Cracks began to form in the cavern walls, a blackness seeping in to block the view. Luna raised her horn and fired a single beam into the air. It struck the very top of the cavern, which caused the whole thing to shatter like glass. The sound made the foal jump to her hooves with a yelp, her head swiveling about as the walls faded into a bubbly black cloud that drifted away on a soft breeze. They stood on a sandy beach, the ocean stretching out before them. The waves lapped at their hooves in a lazy rhythm, and behind them was a plain of endless green grass dotted with purple and white flowers. It was night, but the moon shined brightly alongside the brilliant starscape. The filly gasped and spun in a circle, trying to take it all in. When she spotted Luna, she shrank back, eyes going wide and ears folding. Only now did Luna notice that she was a unicorn, her tiny horn poking out of the messily blonde mane. For several seconds, they merely stared at one another. Luna could see the worry in the foal's eyes and had to fight to keep her expression neutral. Eventually, she turned away and left the filly alone, prepared to leave the dream entirely to continue her duties. She paused, the tiniest of gasps breaking through her royal veneer. "Are you the Moon Princess?" Why did Luna suddenly feel like bolting? She shook off her desire and looked back over her shoulder to find the filly standing tall once more and looking up at her with a big, curious eyes. "Yes, I am your lunar princess." "Really?" The foal leaned forward. "Really? Really?" Luna found herself in the uncommon position of having absolutely no idea what to do. After a few seconds, she attempted to smile, fully aware of how terribly forced it was. "Yes, really." The filly's eyes widened even more, if such a thing was possible. She sat and glanced around the beach. Did you make all the mean foals go away?" Turning to face the child properly, butterflies floating in her stomach, Luna nodded. "I did." The foal looked at her, jaw loose and eyes going moist. Her shoulders shook as tears prepared to break free. There was a rising feeling in Luna's chest, a distinct panic that threatened to take over her mind. Once again, she felt the urge to bolt from this dream entirely. The filly's hooves kicked up sand as she burst into a gallop straight for the princess. She leapt and wrapped her tiny legs around one of Luna's. "Thank you. Thank you." It was all she could manage to get out before breaking down into sobs. She pressed her cheeks to Luna's legs and wailed, the sound piercing the night air. Luna's jaw dropped. In spite of her bleeding heart, something else held her attention, a feeling she almost couldn't fathom. All of her anxiety left her as she dropped down to press the foal to her chest with a single leg. Amidst all the sobbing, Luna smiled. "Oh, shh, calm down," she cooed. "It's okay, my little pony. It is going to be okay." Such words. She had not offered such words in so long. The whispered sounds that Luna offered were precious to her as they were to the filly bawling into her coat. They tasted sweet on her lips, like nectar. Eventually, the foal's sobs faded to mere sniffles. Luna patted her small head with a smile. "There. All better, yes?" The filly nodded but continued to cling to Luna's chest. Will they come back?" With a hoof to her lips, Luna considered the foal. "What is your name, little one?" "Dinky." Luna set a hoof to Dinky's chin, making her look up. "Dinky, why do ponies say such things to you?" The tiny face scrunched up, but Dinky rubbed her eyes and kept from crying. They're making fun of my mommy. Her eyes are broke." "Broke?" Luna tilted her head. "Her eyes aren't really broke, are they?" "Mommy says they're fine, but they're not." Dinky pulled away from Luna's hoof and bowed her head. "The other foals say she's dumb. Mommy's not dumb." Luna's smile broadened a touch. "She's not?" "No." Dinky glared up at her, cheeks puffed out and red. Leaning over the foal, Luna asked, "So, what is your mommy?" Dinky paused, her face twisting as she struggled to understand Luna's meaning. "She's, Mommy's..." She crossed her hooves and sulked. "Dinky?" Luna waited for the foal to look up. "What do you like about your mommy?" A moment passed as Dinky stared at her, and then her face lit up. "She's fun. She takes me flying." "Oh?" Luna took only a moment to wonder at Dinky's horn before offering another smile. "Go on, tell me more." "She works a lot." Dinky frowned at that thought. "I wish she'd be home more, but Mommy brings home candies from bonbons." The grin came back in a flash. "And she helps me with letters and tells me stories, like yours." Luna leaned back as the filly pointed towards her. My story?" "Uh-huh," Dinky nodded empathetically. "You live on the moon and your sister missed you. You had to fight and you couldn't come home. Mommy says that she scrunched her face and worked on her lips. "The elephants of harming? A hoof over her face and great willpower were the only things that saved Luna from revealing her smile. Elements of harmony. Yeah, Dinky bounced, her smile in full spread. Mommy says that they taught you and your sister to be friends again. She paused and tilted her head. Is that true? Luna's chest swelled. It is. My sister and I are good friends again, just like we used to be. Good. Dinky kicked the sand. Her smile faded. But why didn't you come out? The swelling reversed course. Suddenly, Luna's heart was in a vice. Come out. Her face was set in what was probably meant to be a confident expression. Dinky sat down and raised her hoof as though to dictate. Mommy says the Moon Princess never leaves the castle. She says you hide 'cause you're scared that ponies don't like you. She lowered her hoof and shook her head. I think that's silly, 'cause I like you. For a time, Luna could only stare at the little pony. What makes your mother think I'm scared? Dinky shrugged. I think Miss Sparkle told her. You know Twilight Sparkle? The filly nodded so forcefully, Luna wondered if her head wasn't about to pop off. Uh-huh, she's the librarian. She's really smart and nice and knows lots of magic. She lets Mommy borrow books for me to read. Dinky gave her a little bounce and grinned. I want to be just like Miss Sparkle when I grow up. Dinky's happiness was infectious. Luna found herself smiling down at her. That's very ambitious, and I am sure Miss Sparkle is honored. Now, she lowered her face so that it was level with the filly's. Do you know what you need to do when the other foals talk about your mommy? The smile faded quickly as Dinky shrank back and looked at her hooves. I don't know. If I was good at magic like Miss Sparkle, I'd turn them into frogs. Luna swiftly raised a hoof to her lips to hold in her snicker. That is one option. Are you good at magic like Miss Sparkle? Dinky kicked the sand with a pebble. No. Well then, I guess we'll just have to try something else. She once again raised Dinky's head by the chin. The next time the others talk about your mommy, I want you to tell them exactly what makes your mommy so special. The foal frowned as she considered this advice. Why? Because then you'll be proud, and their words can't hurt you. Luna nuzzled Dinky. You know your mommy is the best, so tell them that. When you show them how much you love your mommy, they'll stop. What if they don't? Then at least you know how special your mommy is. Luna beamed down at the filly as she sat up. As long as you remember just how good she is, their words won't hurt you. Oh. Dinky was still thinking on the matter, but eventually smiled and nodded. Okay, I'll try. Thank you, Princess. No, thank you, she replied with a sigh. For what? For liking me. Luna winked, eliciting a small giggle from Dinky. She could feel the swelling sensation in her chest again, and couldn't help but grin as she turned away. Do you want to play? Luna paused to look back at Dinky. Oh, I'm sorry, little one. I would, but I'm a little busy. I have other little ponies to visit in their dreams. Aww, Dinky pouted, but quickly regained her smile. Thank you for helping, Princess. I'll tell Mommy you came. She glanced around at the empty beach. How do I go home? There was no resisting the laugh this time. Do not worry, Dinky. Dreams are for playing, so play to your heart's content. When it is time to go home, you'll be there. Oh, okay. The filly promptly sat down and began toying with the sand, a large scoop appearing in her hooves without her even noticing. I'm gonna make you a castle, like your sister's. It'll be better than hers, she nodded with confidence. Luna chuckled and lifted off, floating backwards as the filly waved. I'm sure it will be. Farewell, little one. It has been a pleasure. Goodbye, Princess Luna. She turned away, flapping towards the moon with an energy she had not felt in a very, very long time. She wasn't afraid of me at all. Octavia giggled at the beaming princess, who was clapping her hooves and grinning in a way she had never seen before. That is great, Luna. I knew that ponies would begin warming up to you before long. But this wasn't just a pony, Luna replied theatrically. It was a foal. She couldn't have been more than 4. The youngest are usually the most afraid. She set a shaking hoof to her lips, eyes shining. If even a foal can like me, then surely any pony can in time. Right? I fail to grasp why they don't like you now. Octavia took a dainty bite from the pasta sitting at the table before her and let out a small sigh. She took a moment to swallow and dab her lips with a handkerchief. Is all the food you eat this good? Luna turned her nose up from her own plate. Back in my time, they used to include chicken or shrimp, perhaps a little grilled beef. Clearly, ponies have lost their sense of taste over the last 1,000 years. Octavia choked on her second bite. Really? Luna snorted out with a laugh. No, but you should have seen the look on your face. Oh. Octavia sank back into her chair with a sigh and a smile. You have a gift for looking serious. Luna frowned and stared at her untouched plate. Maybe that's why most ponies don't care for me. Yet if that were so, why did little Dinky warm up to me? Maybe because of her mother, Octavia ventured with a shrug. Another polite bite. Perhaps. And she did mention my sister's protege. Luna's fork stirred the pasta about as she pondered. Mayhaps the element of magic is trying to improve my image? Octavia watched Luna with a small frown, her eyes lingering on the fork. Is something wrong? Luna flinched and looked up with uncertain eyes. No, nothing's wrong. She took a quick bite, perhaps for emphasis. Silence passed between them as they continued to eat. Octavia had a lot of questions on her mind, some more pressing than others. She spent the time attempting to sort her thoughts. You have a very dignified way of eating, Luna said. She glanced away as soon as Octavia tried to meet her eyes. Thank you. Octavia offered a warm smile. I spent a lot of time practicing to use cutlery properly. It wasn't easy, not without a horn. May I ask why? The fork paused just outside of Octavia's mouth. I beg your pardon? Luna's mouth snapped close as she blushed. Forgive me, I should not pry. A awkward quiet passed between them as Luna focused particularly hard on eating. Octavia studied her once more, buying time by chewing slowly. It wasn't a bad tactic, if her taste buds had anything to say about it, yet it was hard to really enjoy the meal with her host so timid. Octavia thought on how excited, perhaps giddy was the better word, Luna had been throughout the visit. To see her withdraw once more, she didn't like it. Not at all. My sister. Luna looked up. What? Averting her gaze, Octavia said, I have an older sister. I used to look up to her a lot. A smile formed across Luna's face. Go on. Octavia sighed and fiddled with her fork. Benjamina's opinion was always important to me. She was the rich pony in the family. I wanted to be just like her. I see. Luna leaned forward, her smile broadening. So that's why you wish to become an important pony. I know a bit about looking up to a sister. Another deep sigh escaped Octavia's lips as she toyed with her food. Octavia? She closed her eyes. The familiar, unpleasant sound filled her head. She laughed at me. Your sister? Octavia nodded, setting her fork down as her stomach nodded. I told her what I wanted to do for a living, and she laughed in my face. It really hurt. She said I'd never become an elite like her by playing the cello. I see. Luna sighed and shook her head. So your drive is to prove her wrong? Something like that. Octavia pushed her plate away and leaned against the table, wishing her stomach would calm down. Yet another lingering silence. She was continuing to hate it when that happened. Slow, measured breaths helped her fight down the bitterness that started to rise up within her. "You can do it, Octavia." She looked up to find Luna smiling at her. "I have listened to you play once a week for a month now, and let us not forget I watched you from your dreams. Trust in your special talent, and you will achieve that goal." Octavia huffed a feeble laugh and pressed her hoof to her cheek. "Playing the cello isn't my special talent." Seeing Luna's jaw drop was a little satisfying, but only a little. That's a pretty typical reaction. The princess closed her mouth, but she was still staring. You mean you have something else? What is it?" The blood rushed to Octavia's cheeks as she averted her eyes. She mumbled her response. Luna leaned forward. "What was that?" With a wince, Octavia spoke up. "Singing. My special talent is singing." "Oh." Luna set a hoof to her chin, her brow furrowing. "Now that you speak of it, that does better suit your cutie mark. Why keep it a secret?" Octavia fidgeted and stared at her plate. "It's not a secret, really. I don't like drawing attention to it." Luna considered her with the smallest of frowns. "Because of your sister?" "Something like that." Octavia looked up at last. "Can we please not discuss this? I'd rather focus on your progress." "I suppose." Luna's frown deepened a touch as she focused on her food. "I do not wish to pry, though I'd admit my recent success isn't so easy to enjoy knowing that you may be suffering." "I am here for you, Princess," Octavia said, going rigid and pulling her plate back towards herself. She held her head high. "You don't need to worry about me." For a third time, silence reigned. Luna cast a forlorn look towards Octavia, but made no attempt to reply. For that, Octavia was glad. She tried to enjoy what was left of her meal, but for some reason it didn't seem as appetizing as it once had a moment ago. The quiet lingered, and Octavia started to struggle with her poise. Her host ate slowly and kept fidgeting. She was trying to meet Octavia's eyes, but couldn't seem to manage it. It was only after several long minutes of this that Octavia was struck by the precariety of the situation. At which point, she began to fidget and look for a new topic. "So, she said at last, "are you going to be doing anything for Nightmare Night?" Luna's fork dropped to her plate with a clink. Her expression twisted as if she had been stabbed. "Do not speak to me of that holiday." She spat out the word like it was poisonous. Octavia blinked. "You don't like... Oh." "Oh is correct," Luna sneered and turned her face away. "And to think, Celestia actually suggested that I go out and celebrate it." Octavia flinched and looked down, her cheeks burning. "I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking." Luna pressed a hoof to her forehead. "'Tis not your fault, Octavia. If any pony is to blame, I suppose it is me. But no." Luna shot her a one-eyed frown. "Like it or not, I created Nightmare Moon, so when little foals travel around mocking me, I have only myself to blame." Something about the way Luna said that struck a chord with Octavia. She sat up straight and shook her head. "They're not mocking you." "Then what would you call it?" Luna spread her hooves wide. "They go out and they listen to a story about how I am going to eat them if they don't give me any confectionaries. Worse, the foals believe it." She grumbled and glared at her half-finished plate. "No wonder they all fear me." Octavia frowned at the princess, a strange mix of concern and annoyance filling her. Dinky didn't. Luna didn't look up. Perhaps she doesn't attend the Abominist Festival. Or perhaps she knows that Nightmare Night is about having fun. Fun? Luna peered at Octavia, her lips curling back to show her teeth. You think I like that children believe I am going to eat them? Dinky didn't believe you were going to eat her. Octavia pressed a hoof to her chest. I remember going out for Nightmare Night as a foal. I was entertained. Luna slammed her hoof against the table, making the whole thing shake. Her wings jerked open as she snarled. We're done discussing this. If you like Nightmare Night so much, you're not Nightmare Moon. Her lips stilled. Luna stepped back from the table. She seemed to shrink, her wings snapping to her sides and her body low. Her eyes stared at nothing and her lips trembled. I was her. Do not speak as though it didn't happen. Octavia felt her body grow cold. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have brought it up at all, but if I may... You're not her anymore. She chewed her lip and averted her eyes from Luna's shivering form. The sight felt so wrong. They don't mean anything mean-spirited by it, Luna. Maybe they don't, Luna whispered as she sat up slowly. But it hurts all the same. The silence was intensely frustrating. How many times was this? Neither of them touched their plates, and they couldn't meet one another's eyes. Octavia's mind couldn't escape the recent conversation. It swirled around the subject of Nightmare Night, refusing to give up on the topic, no matter how much she wanted it to. She didn't dare say anything else about it, though she was nigh desperate to do so. Forgive me, Luna tapped her plate with a hoof. I have ruined our dinner. Octavia studied the princess's forlorn face. She hated seeing that pout. It didn't belong there. The thought gave renewed courage. Where does that foal live? Luna blinked and looked up. You mean Dinky? Ponyville. Why? Go there. Octavia leaned forward in an attempt to show her determination. This weekend, for Nightmare Night, go to Ponyville. A groan rose from Luna's throat as she shook her head. I thought we were finished with this conversation. Luna, aren't you aware of the chance this offers? Octavia asked. Dinky wasn't afraid. She likes you. There has to be a reason. Go to Ponyville and find out. Maybe there are more ponies there who aren't stuck on this whole Nightmare Moon thing. No, Luna shook her head. That won't happen. But how do you know if you don't try? Octavia sat back and raised her hooves. Right now, Nightmare Night is about Nightmare Moon. Why not show them that you and her aren't the same? But you're not the same. This time, when Luna flinched, Octavia only leaned forward to press her words. Nightmare Moon is gone. So why don't you take this opportunity to take the holiday away from her? Make it about you. Luna studied her, fidgeting in place. It is not that simple. I appreciate what you're trying to do, Octavia, but you're suggesting I overturn something that has been set in place for centuries. Octavia shook her head. I'm not saying do away with the traditions. Just let them see that you aren't her. It's like... She paused, tapping her chin in search of a proper explanation. Let her be the boogeyman. Nightmare Moon is the villain. You're the hero. Something like that. You mean... Luna cocked her head to one side, her eyes losing focus as she thought. Like casting off the veil? I suppose. Octavia blushed and fiddled with her food. Is that a bad idea? I'm not sure. Luna set her elbows on the table and tapped her hooves together as she pondered. I can't say that it's a bad idea, but I am not convinced it is a good one either. Octavia perked her ears with a weak smile. So, are you going to go? Unlikely. Oh. She wilted and toyed with her food some more. Octavia? She looked up to find Luna smiling. Thank you. I know you mean well. Octavia returned the smile. Of course. What are friends for? Luna blinked, her smile fading. The lapse lasted for only a moment. Of course. Luna? Luna jerked as if coming out of a trance. She turned to find Celestia standing close, watching her with a frown. Are you all right? Yes. Luna blushed and turned back to the balcony to find the sun just peering over the horizon. Forgive me, sister, I was merely lost in thought. Celestia nodded, though she didn't stop watching Luna. So, how was dinner last night? Pleasant enough. Good, that's good. Celestia turned to stare out at the scenery. How are you and Miss Melody getting along? We're fine. Just fine. Celestia's eye shifted towards Luna, her frown deepening. Luna sighed. What do you want me to say, sister? Celestia turned her head to study her. You never talk about her. I just wanted to know you're making friends. Friend. Luna closed her eyes and saw Octavia smile. What are friends for? I guess I have. A smile arose on her lips. Yes, I think that is a safe conclusion. Celestia let out a long sigh and bowed her head. That's good. That's wonderful, Luna. She looked up, this time with a beaming smile. Perhaps more will come. Perhaps. Luna frowned, her mind once again playing over the conversation over dinner. Perhaps if I... Luna? Celestia eyed her. What is it? Luna remained silent, slowly turning her head to look at the south. There, just barely visible in the distance, sat a sleepy town called Ponyville. Her heart clenched and her stomach flipped as she thought on the possibilities. Luna? Sister. Luna turned to Celestia, her cheeks burning, her eyes low. Could you tell me a little bit more about Nightmare Night? Celestia's eyes widened. Her gaze slowly shifted from Luna to the distant town, then back again. Her smile came back. I would love to. And that was Chapter 8 of Gentle Knights, Audience of One. Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. I have no closing notes, so with that, we end off our chapter. And I hope you all have a wonderful Never After All. This is your host, signing off, hoping to see you in our next episode.